Thank you so much, Tadeusz. Hello, everyone. It's very exciting to see so many people from all corners of the world. I saw the list of in the chat already. We're really exciting to see from Catalonia, from Sarajevo. That's really nice. The two heroes of my lecture tonight. So welcome, everyone. And it's just appropriate that a few days before Pesach, we'll speak about one of the most wonderful Haggadot that was ever created, and see how much we can learn from it. And it's about incredible journey, as I said, from Catalonia to where it is today. So I want to begin that we are speaking on a book that was maybe when it was done, when it was created, an ordinary book, because Haggadot, as we know, are plenty. Every house has some, too, especially in the modern times. We have many at home, and they are easily accessible. You can buy, and so on. But so the text in them is more or less the same. It's repeated itself. So why one is becoming more important than another one? It's really the fortune of this book and what it contains besides the standard, more or less, text. So I want to begin with this saying from the Zohar, that everything depends on fortune, even a Torah scroll in the shrine. I mean, even a Torah scroll can have its luck and can be remembered for generations and be used all the time, while others go to burial and forgotten, and so are books as well. Our Haggadah became very well known, and actually it's the first Hebrew manuscript that became well known in the West or in the world in the late 19th century, and actually the first ever monograph on one single Jewish object that appeared in any language was on this book. This is the title page of the first book that appeared on this Haggadah, and where the name was given to it, the Haggadah from Sarajevo, that was published in Vienna shortly after it was acquired by the museum, about which we'll speak later. So it's really, the name was given at that time, the Haggadah from Sarajevo. It was common at that time to call manuscripts after the cities where they were located, like the Paris Psalter or the Vienna Genesis and so on. So here we have the Sarajevo Haggadah, and that's how this manuscript became to be well known. I want to open already in the beginning that it's not maybe the most beautiful Haggadah from medieval Spain. There is one or two that maybe are more attractive or more important from historical point of view and artistic one, but this is the most famous one to be sure. This first edition that was printed just at the end of the 19th century in Vienna was a luxurious edition. By all means, you can see that it's using already at that time all the techniques that were only available in Germany and Austria of the time of printing, with color type plates, and that are really an invention that was just of printing that was just invented some years before this Haggadah was printed, this facsimile was printed, and with text and so on. We'll come back to it later. So the Haggadah became well known and opened really the eyes for many people who were interested in Jewish visual culture, because very little was known at the time about that. And actually, even at that time, there were many who speculated that there was such a thing like medieval Jewish art that could be figurative or not. And the most common hypothesis was that the illustrators were not Jews, and that's why we have this kind of images in Hebrew medieval manuscripts. But so the Haggadah was really now the source for questioning and dealing with these materials from a new point of view, because the Haggadah is not a book for home. It's not something for the synagogue or public. So why should one have illustrations there that are not fitting what they feel on with what they identify or the traditions that they want to highlight and so on? So this Haggadah opened many questions all the time. And since its discovery and this first facsimile, many other editions came, like this one that I'm showing you in Yugoslavia already of the time. This book, a small book that was written by a professor at the University of Belgrade, art historian, with few pages and facsimiles from the Haggadah that appeared in 1953, and it's already a national treasure of Yugoslavia at that time. And the most famous edition of the past was this one that was published by Cecil Roth, the Jewish art historian from Oxford, that was a historian, but in love with Jewish art. And this facsimile that appeared in 7-8 languages, I'm showing you the Hebrew and the English editions here, the title, the cover of the both editions that appeared in 1963 and sold in hundreds of thousands of copies all over the world, as I said, in many, especially the Hebrew and the English editions, but also in Italian, in French, in German, in Spanish. All these editions, with the introduction of Cecil Roth, became like a household. And actually the copy that I have at home, the first one that I got when I was a first-year student in art history here at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, was this one that you see on the right, which we've been using every year since now more than 40 years in my home. Another edition that became very popular is this one that was published again in Belgrade in 1984. And here the author was a local Jew, Eugen Werber, that he wrote the introduction to the facsimile that is now a full facsimile that was published at that time in Yugoslav times still. And that edition came with this advertisement in the American press, a wonderful gift for Pesach, first complete edition of the renowned Sarajevo Haggadah, yes, and so on and so forth. You could buy it for $29 and for $2 for shipping and so on. So that edition is also very popular. And again, so we have several facsimiles that was printed when hardly anyone could see it and visit it. It was really very limited access to get to the museum and see the Haggadah in those years. Some newer editions are these two that we see here, but they published already later. I mean, like in after Yugoslavia broke to several states, or here we see one edition on the left that is printed in 613 copies, the number of Taryag mitzvot, a luxurious edition, another one on the right, another edition that is only for collectors. So the Haggadah became like very common item, and even some editions that you go to gift shops in Sarajevo, you can buy small copies that some of them contain all the illustrations, some only part of them, and some even, like very small copy that is the size. I put a stamp here so that you see the size. You can put it in your pocket in the shirt and go away and have a souvenir of the Haggadah. Like when you come to visit Sarajevo, this one thing you must see and you want a souvenir, so you can buy this small facsimile and put it in your pocket and be reminded of the illustrations, much reduced in this small copy. I'm sorry. Okay. The line of directors of the Sarajevo museums, they all, as far as we know, appreciated this monument that they have in their collection highly. This is the director, Mamovic, that was the director in the 90s when Yugoslavia was at war. And he wrote this book on the history of the Sarajevo Haggadah in Yugoslavia. And he calls one of his chapters, I want to show you the title of the chapter here, The Gem of the World Under the Threshold of Shepherd's Heart. It tells you about a story that happened during the Second World War. We'll get to it later, but I want just that you see the gem of the world. That's how this is referred to, this manuscript, like the Mona Lisa of Bosnia. This is the current director of the museum with whom I worked also. He's a Muslim, Mirsad, that is, also very much want to promote this item that will be well known. And he was the one who was the first really in the line of directors of the museum that was able to print a copy of the Haggadah under the auspice of the museum and not a private publisher like it was before, or the state that printed the facsimiles. He wanted something that the museum will issue. This was the first time it was done, and I was honored to write the volume that accompanied this edition, and I'll tell you about it later. It was printed just in 2018, and it's available only from the museum shop. The museum wants to have the full rights on it, so you can buy it only online from the museum shop, or if you visit Sarajevo and go to the gift shop of the museum. The influence of all these years that this Haggadah was around, the facsimile, I mean, since the late 19th century, made such a strong impact on the world of art history in general, and Jewish art in particular, but not only on scholars, but also in the media, you can say. Many were inspired by it and saw it as a source of inspiration for all kinds of cultural events. Some artists that were very influenced by the images that they saw. I'm showing you one of the foremost Israeli artists, Aryeh Aroch, who never saw the original, but he saw the facsimile, one of those that I showed you of the 50s, and he created this painting that is called The Creation, that is clearly taken from the Haggadah. Here is the page, the first page of the Haggadah, really, that shows the first days of creation, and he took the image of the separation and darkness and light, white and black, and he made this as the topic of his painting, because he said he's a modern artist, abstract artist, and he saw in this image, in this small square in the Haggadah, the first page, the source of modern Jewish art that is abstract and that puts emphasis on relationships between different shapes and so on. So he saw with this, like the beginning of Jewish art, he was fascinated. He's an Ashkenazi artist. He was fascinated by this Sephardic Haggadah and made it as a source. You see, but he changed the image. He didn't want to copy it exactly. It's, by the way, it's an oil painting. It's a large one. He added here 2 other items that you don't find in here, but you find them in the next page of the Haggadah. Here is the image that he copied or created based on it. The next page of the coming days of the creation has the, let's say, we'll go back to it later, the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and here we have the lights that are added. The lights were created only on Wednesday, the sun and the moon. So he copied that and made it into the first day, because for him that would make this image more harmonious, more, let's say, in the sky that we have here, the light and the darkness. You have the sun for the light and the moon for darkness. So that's how he created the harmony that he sought. But anyway, it's all inspired by the Haggadah. I want to show you another image that this artist created. I just selected him because I love his work, and to show you how the Sarajevo Haggadah was influential in all kinds of aspects. This he calls this painting by the same artist, Aryeh Aroch, Moshe Rabbeinu of Sarajevo, he calls this. We see Moses here holding the tablets in the desert. Look at the landscape behind him. It's like everything is red and no trees, no vegetation, and the sun is burning. It's like maybe the Sinai desert, but Moses is standing above these boxes that are beneath him. The original image of the Sarajevo Haggadah, he doesn't hide that he copies it from the Sarajevo Haggadah, is this one. Moses on the top of Mount Sinai when he gets the laws, when the tablets of the law from God, and these are the Israelites here. But instead of Israelites, in the painting of Aroch, we see these boxes. What are these boxes? The image is done in the 50s. It's actually before the one that we saw a second ago by Aroch. And really what he wants to show us, these are like sarcophagi, and if you count them, there are 6, yes, for the 6 million that perished in the Holocaust, like his family, and he visited the camps, Aryeh Aroch himself, after the war. So Moses, while in the Haggadah, before, we saw the Israelites. Now the Israelites are gone and they perished in the Holocaust. So you can see that the impact of the Haggadah was tremendous and in all kinds of directions that show us how the art, how it influenced modern art in our time. And these 2 pages of the first 2 pages of the Haggadah, that again, I hope we'll have time to expand them and go over some details about them, were inspirational for many, because this is really a unique feature that we have in Jewish art, that the 6 days of creation are shown. Actually, the 7 days, for each one there is a square. And I just want to show you one work of art, another one of an American Jewish artist born in New York that created something based on it. So just to totally abstract, but you can see where it derives from very clearly, the days, the sun and the moon in circles, like we saw before. Yes, I'm sorry, like here, the circle of the world that is shown for each day. Yes, the creation of water and so on, and the circles that she took and made them into her image and calls it Bereshit, Genesis of creation. And even in the world of music, the Sarajevo Haggadah was influential, like this musicologist from Sarajevo, musician, that wrote this, especially based on the Haggadah that she grew up with, and she's not Jewish again, but she performed this several times. Music of the book based on the text of and the illustrations in the Haggadah, or the novels that were written based on it. The most famous one is this one, The People of the Book, by Geraldine Brooks, that appeared in 2008. She's a journalist. She was in Sarajevo, in Bosnia during the 1990s, during the war, and she learned about the Haggadah. She is a Jewish writer from Australia originally, and she wrote this book that is totally imaginary. It's like one critic called it an erudite Da Vinci Code. It's like the Jewish Da Vinci. It's full of suspense and so on. It's lovely, but very far from truth, but based on some historical facts. So it's recommended, but if you know the history, it's better, or you can compare and so on. But anyway, here is her book on the Haggadah, and the novel that was a bestseller, that was translated again to several languages. I'm showing the Hebrew edition, there's the Spanish one, and the Bosnian one. Okay, so even in this book, she really doesn't speak about the Haggadah, the illustrations of the contents of the Haggadah. It's more about the adventures of the Haggadah, of the manuscripts, I would say, and where it was and who used it and so on. But anyway, she makes one fine, nice theory, is this miniature of the Seder that we see in the Haggadah, where the family is seated around the Seder table. This is the head of the family, his wife, and the child. And there is a woman that's sitting on the other side of the table, and she has dark features and also like this large nose. And she decided that, Geraldine Brooks decided that this is the artist of the manuscript, because cannot be that a Jew would illustrate this kind of painting. So she calls her by name. She is Zahara bint Ibrahim al-Tarek. She was adopted by the master, the Spanish master, that was a Jew, yes, that adopted her, and then she illustrated for him this Haggadah. Yes, she's like, it was a slave at the beginning, and then maybe she became a Jew, maybe not. It's not clear, but anyway, in the novel, she makes very like nice story of her life and connects her to, in this way, to the Haggadah, and she's like the artist who could illustrate figurative images because she's not Jewish. The Haggadah was also became well known in commercial advertisements, commercials and advertisements, like we see here, invitations to all kinds of events that are connected with Sephardic Jewry, like this one for the Ladino Authority in Israel, stamps that were printed in Bosnia, like these 3 stamps are in honor of the Jewish community, and the central one shows an image from the Haggadah, like the national treasure, as I said. So here, these 3 that you see here, is taken directly from the Haggadah. So we have like this Haggadah becoming, let's say, provider of icons to the culture of our time because of these publications about the Haggadah. And even you see, I'm showing you covers of scholarly books that were printed in Israel. Each one is two of them are by Hebrew University professors, all good friends of mine, by the way. So, and the cover of their books is decorated with a page from the Sarajevo Haggadah. Yes, this book, and there is one with Arya Aroch image, another one by Professor Dalia Marx. So why now that I spoke about the publicity of the Haggadah and its impact on the Jewish cultural world in particular, let's go into some details and see what it is and what it contains and why it became so important. So here you have some facts about it. We estimate that it was created around mid-14th century in Catalonia, for sure, probably in Barcelona. I'll speak about that in a second. Today it's in the Museum of Bosnia and Herzegovina, as I mentioned. And so it has a Haggadah today can be 20 pages long or something like that. But this one has many parchment folios, much more than we have today in any Haggadah, because it has a lot of illustrations. So not every page is crowded with text. You have some of the measurements, and you have what is the most important, what gave it its fame, are the full page miniatures pages. We have 34 of them that contain together 69 topics or topics from the Bible and others, especially from the books of Genesis and Exodus. For each one, the number of illustrations that there are that are dedicated. And you can see already that for Genesis, there are more for Exodus, although Genesis is not part of the Exodus story. We'll speak about that in a second, why Genesis is included, and so many miniatures on Genesis, although the story of Exodus begins in Egypt, in the second book of the Pentateuch, not in the first one. Maybe it has the beginning in there with Joseph and his brothers, but the story of the slavery in Egypt is in the book of Exodus and the redemption. And so just to show you, I mean, how these pages look like, and I'm sorry, I cannot share with you the actual manuscript or the facsimile, but if you have one, look at home, the pages that are illuminated on one side of the parchment, of the folio, and the other side is blank. The patron who commissioned this Haggadah did not save money on slaughtering this number of animals. We don't know exactly how we can calculate, and use only one side of the parchment despite the cost, because the parchment has two sides. One is the flesh side of the animal, the other one is the hair side, H-A-I-R, yes, and this is lesser quality, and the images appear only on the flesh side of the parchment. And so they tell the story of the Jewish people, since Haggadah means telling. The Sephardic Jews in the Middle Ages thought that this is the night to tell the heroic deeds of the Jews, of the Hebrews in the past, and they begin not with the Exodus, they begin with the creation, with Genesis chapter 1. So we have many miniatures that are dedicated to Genesis because it's much more narrative. And actually the hero of the Haggadah, you can say, because the number of miniatures that are dedicated to him is not Moses, but Joseph. And there are many miniatures from the life of Joseph. Here I'm just showing an opening of a spread of 2 pages that shows from here at top, Joseph is dreaming that the stars and the sun and the moon are bowing to him, to the star that represents him, or here the sheaves of grain that are bowing down to the one that represents him. Here is Joseph in bed, and you can see I'm very interested in ethnography as well, so I'm very interested to see how people were sleeping in the Middle Ages, what kind of beds they have, what kind of blankets and head covering and so on. So there are many interesting facts that you can learn from the illustrations of this Haggadah, but about the Jewish life in Catalonia of the time, but maybe this not the time now to speak about that. But anyways, blaming him for his dreams and for what he believes about him. The next miniature here at top is the brothers are slaughtering an animal so that to take to Jacob the cloths with the blood to show that Joseph has disappeared, and they're putting him in the pit here. Here are the midnights that are arriving, and the brothers are selling Joseph, here he is, to the midnights. So the story of Joseph, the narrative of the life of Joseph is very, very detailed, very long. Many episodes from his life are shown, and I think the pattern of the manuscript saw Joseph as a model for him. And you can think about it a second, and in a few minutes I'll tell you why I think this is the case. Okay, so the place where this manuscript was created, we are not sure, but we think it's Barcelona, but for sure it is Catalonia. Why we think it's Catalonia or Catalonia? Because Catalonia of the time was the center of the 14th century for the production of luxurious Haggadot. I mean, many elite Jewish families in 14th century Catalonia, especially in Barcelona, the capital, were interested in a beautiful manuscript Haggadah to be used at the Seder. They commissioned very luxurious one. We know at least about 8 or 9 that are highly, sophisticated and very expensive, like the Sarajevo Haggadah. One of them is called the Golden Haggadah, that all the illustrated pages have in the background gold leaf in the background, which makes it even more, let's say, costly manuscript that was produced. And we can learn about this desire to own a Haggadah from even the illustrations themselves. Here is another one. We saw the Sarajevo, the Golden Haggadah. Here is another one from this family, you can say, of 14th century Catalan Haggadot. It's called the Barcelona Haggadah. It's in the British Library in London, like the Golden Haggadah. And here is the page of the Seder night with Halachma Anya written at the top. And look at the beauty of the page, how beautifully it's decorated with only 3 words that open the Haggadah. Halachma Anya, this bread of affliction. And let's see the detail. Here's the family around the table, the master of the house, his father, the mother, the daughter, the child here, and the plate is put on the head of the child. It's like going out of Egypt. This is a custom that is still known today. And on the table, I wanted to see what's on the table. Let's see the detail. Here, on the table, we have 1, 2, 3 Haggadot. 3 open Haggadot that show us that this kind of family that could commission such a luxurious Haggadah written in gold letters and so on, would not even be, let's say, 1 Haggadah was not enough. So they could even commission more than 1. And I remind you, this is the period before invention of printing. To produce a manuscript that is illuminated is very costly on parchment, and not every family could afford a book. And for example, among the neighbors, among the Spaniards of the time, most people were illiterate. Most, I would say, more than 90%, and would not commission even 1 book. So for 1 family to commission 3 Haggadot, and I'm sure they had Sidurim and Bibles and so on, but anyway, so we see on the table of the Seder 3 Haggadot opened to show us the literacy of the Jews of the time, the love of the Passover, and the Haggadah. That is what the main object that represents the holiday. And actually, some of the rabbis of that time, the Catalan rabbis like Here I'm showing the title page of one of the Catalan rabbis, Prof. that lived just around the time the Haggadah was produced. This is the title page of his book that was printed in this edition in Vienna. You see this Rabbi Isaac, who is called Prof. Duran Alevi of the Kingdom of Catalonia. Okay, so he writes in his book, this book that he offered, what are the best ways to study Torah and the Jewish books, the Sifrei Kodesh, as we call them, yes, the books of Jewish law and rabbinical books and so on. So he says, he offers many ways how to do it. So the sixth way, one must always study from beautiful books, pleasing in the beauty and harmony of their calligraphy and their parchment, and with splendid decorations and binding. Yes, so he says, it is not only appropriate, but an obligation, to decorate these books and endeavor to make them as beautiful, as sumptuous, and as pleasing as possible. And he ends his discussion of this, he says, Al ze amru ve'eli ve'anveu. On this it says in the Song of Miriam, in the Torah, this is my God, I'll beautify him. So you should really pray to God from beautiful books, and the synagogues must be very attractive and so on, because this is all to honor God and to show that you do all the commandments. So with this kind of recommendation, it's not surprising that such luxurious Haggadot were produced. So let's go back to the Sarajevo Haggadah. It's not only the pages that are with biblical miniatures that are so attractive, but actually every page, every single page of the Haggadah is beautifully designed with nice typography. We can see that the scribe was very careful how he planned to write each word. And there are many decorations in these pages that are just text, quotation marks. So every initial word is written in a special panel with the filigree work in the background with some decorations. And then, for example, here we have the name of the 10 plagues. So each one is written in different color, Dams for the Akinim and so on. And then when he has a place, for example, for the last plague, Makat Bechorim, by the way, they called it Makat Bechorim and not Makat Bechorot, the firstborn, and we see a child or the firstborn lying here like a dead person. And here the simanim, that the signs that are given for remembering the order of the plagues, are also written in gold letters, and then Rabbi Yosef. And so you see how few words are written on a page in order so that we'll have this beautiful decoration, so that the Seder night is very pleasing and the children won't fall asleep. They'll have nice illustrations, they have nice things to talk about, and it's very attractive book from which you read and tell the story of the heroic deeds of the past. And some pages have, like in the middle of the text, they have illustrations. Everyone wants to see how the maror looks like, because we don't know how it can be different vegetables. So here in Spain, you see the maror is much bigger than the two Catalan Jews that are seated here, and the maror looks like an artichoke. This was the kind of maror that they used in Catalonia. But then so the artist is illustrating that so that everyone knows how is the maror. Or here for another page, I call God from the depth. Yes, I call God for help. And so we see two Catalan Jews are praying, one with a book, one just lifting his hands. And you can see also how the artist is, the scribe is doing, is playing with the letters. This is the Nun Sofit, mean, and it can go outside and create a decoration here again. Like everything is given a lot of respect, and much effort is introduced to make this as much as attractive as possible. And there are some pages, again, inside the Haggadah that are full page, like this one. Here we have Rabban Gamliel, is saying the three things that everyone must say in Pesach. And so we see a scene here that shows Rabban Gamliel, this Talmudic rabbi, in a classroom. So he's sitting like the teacher, and these are the students in front of him. Each one is holding a book. I remind you that the book is the you can say, the attribute of a Jew, and he's holding the whip. So because that's how was teaching at the time. So here we have a school scene that you can learn from this episode of Rabban Gamliel in the Haggadah. And by the way, we have one Catalan Haggadah that was never finished, luckily for us, because we can learn a lot from it. It's in the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York, in the library there. It's called the Prato Haggadah. It's also Catalan. So here this Haggadah that was just prepared and not all the illustrations were finished, it shows the same design, but before it was colored. So you see Rabban Gamliel, here is not holding a whip, only a book, and the two students in front of him. So this before coloring, you can see how it was. And by the way, in the Prato Haggadah, the pages are written on both sides, so you can see the text from the back here. Yeah. Okay, so why the Haggadah was so, let's say, richly illustrated? Bibles in medieval Spain, like this one that I'm showing you, the medieval Catalan Bible, also have illustrations. So it's more logical, you would say, that the Bible would have many illustrations for Genesis, for Exodus, for other books of the Bible. But it's not so, because the Sephardim in the Middle Ages, by and large, I can say, because this is true for most of the manuscripts that we know, avoided in the Bibles human figures. They avoided narrative episodes. They preferred only decorations or symbolic images, like here many Bibles have the temple implements. No human figures, but we have the menorah, the table of the showbread, the ark, and so on. I won't go over each one, but they're all temple implements according to the Torah, and then the Mishnah and the Mishnah Torah, and so on. But we don't see any human figure here, no priest that is using the menorah, and so on, because most Bibles are not to be illustrated with human figures. They're too holy, maybe. So the Haggadah that is read at home is not that holy, is read to the children and women and the family, is telling the story of the Israelites, and this is the place to put the illustrations. So that's why we have in the Haggadah what you'll never find in Bibles. Again, the two opening pages of the Sarajevo Haggadah that have illustrations, as I said, from Genesis chapter 1. Is the creation, as we saw before, of the separation between darkness and light, creation of water, the creation of trees, vegetation, and so on and so forth. For each day, there is one square here. Can you hear? It's okay? Okay, so, and this tradition, where it comes from, I mean, why to have it in the Haggadah? Because we can do it in the Haggadah, and if we were, because we are Jews, we can do it in the Haggadah, but the inspiration really comes from the Christian tradition, Christian art, I should say, where you have in the Bibles, the Christian Bibles, the same illustrations, or not the same, but the same, let's say, in spirit, that have in the Christian Bibles, the illuminated ones of the Middle Ages, of the Gothic period, you have this kind of illustrations in the Bible, not in Haggadah, because the Christians don't use Haggadah, but for them, there is no problem to put these illustrations in the Bible, yes, for Christians. So here you see, for example, on this Gothic Bible, in this case from England, and you can see how much similarity is to our Haggadah. For the page is divided into 4. In each one of the 4 panels, there is one episode, yes, and if the panel one is in the background is blue, the other one is red, then red and blue, and here we have the same, red, blue, blue, red, and so on. So this, let's say, idea of how to do it comes from the art of the time, from the Gothic art, Christian art of the time. But of course, there are differences. This is a Christian Bible. This is a Jewish Haggadah. What are the differences? The artist of the Sarajevo Haggadah was extremely pious Jew. I mean, in my opinion, he was what we call Talmid Chacham. He really knew his material, his rabbinical material very well. He's using a lot of midrashim that you'll never find in Christian Bibles. and he's doing other things that are not in the Christian Bibles that show that he's a Jewish artist. Let me show you how it is going. So, for example, here is another Christian Bible on the left. It's the Morgan Bible from France, and it shows the same episodes of the creation. So first of all, here you have Wednesday, Thursday, the creation of the animals of the sea, yes, the fish and so on. Friday, the creation of man, and Saturday. So the order is from right to left, while here you have separation of darkness and light, creation of water, vegetation, and so on. So the order, of course, is from left to right, because it's a Latin Bible, and also what you have here that is missing here, the world is in the shape of a circle, like here, but here you have the Trinity that is doing all this. Every miniature is the Trinity, is the image of man with the crucified halo that is doing it, which is, of course, totally missing here, because even if you do figurative art in Haggadah, you don't show the image of God. That's too forbidden, you can say. Another proof, you can say, is, let's look at the parallels here. Again, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, the creation of man. So here is the creation of man. And then the next episode is the creation of Eve. You see, Adam is sleeping and Eve is coming out of his rib. And then God is taking them, showing them paradise, and this is the temptation here and so on. But what we have in the Sarajevo Haggadah is after Friday comes a miniature that is labeled Yom HaShabbat. And we have an image of a person resting. Here, the artist skipped Shabbat because Friday, the creation of woman, of Eve. Why skip Shabbat? Because Shabbat is not so interesting for Christians in the Middle Ages. It's not so important to dedicate to it full miniature. So it's missing altogether here. The artist skipped it, I think, naively, even not paying too much attention to this. And here we have a full miniature. So you can say how we can show what image is here. Let's see detail. What you see is a Catalan Jew, is not God. A Catalan Jew is sitting and resting. He's not doing anything on Shabbat. He's dressed in very costly garment that is in the color of purple, but he's not doing anything. He's sitting at home. He's stopped working. Yes, so that's the symbol of Shabbat, by showing a man, a Jew, praying or resting on Shabbat. This, you can say, the difference between Jews and Christians of the time. I want to show another miniature that shows the difference, you can say, between Jews and Christians, and many miniatures in the Sarajevo Haggadah show that and really talk about who we are, who are our neighbors. So here is one episode, again, taken from the book of Genesis in the Haggadah. It shows the Rebecca giving birth to the twins. Here is Rebecca, the midwife, and here is Yaakov and Esav are born between their legs. And by the way, this, again, another episode that teaches us a lot about childbirth in the Middle Ages, sitting with midwife, and she's fully dressed, and Rebecca is thanking God for giving her two boys. This is the ideal of Sephardi woman, to have a boy or even two boys is even better. But the reason I'm showing is what happens to them when they grow up. This on the left here. Again, the reading is from right to left. Rebecca is giving birth, and there are the two twins when they grow up. So Esav is becoming a hunter. You see, he's in the field and he's hunting this bird with his bow and arrow. Yes. And Jacob, this is Jacob on the left. What does Jacob do? It says, V'Yaakov ishtam. Yes, Esav yodeh atzayid. Esav knows how to hunt animals. And V'Yaakov ishtam, and Jacob is, I'm not sure how to translate this, like a full, sitting in his tent and studying really that's what it means. So we see, let me show you detail. I'm sorry, I thought I have a detail, but I want what Jacob is doing is really like the image of God that we saw in the second page. Jacob is seated and reading from a book and sitting in the same position, because this is let's say, the ideal of a Jew is to grow up and to study and become a Talmid Chacham, a rabbi, know the rabbinical tradition and so on. So this, you can say, the difference, I would say, very clearly in my mind, between medieval Jew and his neighbors. Yes, this is what we do, this is what you do. This is your hobby, this is our hobby. This is your pastime, this is our pastime. And you can say also, it's not only that, it's even, I think, more that the artist wants to show here, is who is the real inheritor of the Torah. Because in the disputations that were in the medieval Spain, that were Christians disputing with Jewish rabbis like Nachmanides and others in the different disputations, Tortosa and other places, and the interpretation of the Torah. Who is the real inheritor of the Torah, of the Bible? The Christians who interpret it as a prefiguration of the life of Jesus, or the Jews with their interpretation of the commentaries of the Torah. So I think he wants to show us, the artist here, we are those who study this book seriously. You have other, let's say, hobbies, you can say, or preferences. And we can see that in another miniature, in this one, that shows the 10 plagues. Now we are in the book of Exodus. And so we see the 9th and the 10th plagues. So here's the 9th one, is Moses before Pharaoh, and the plague of darkness. So you see the Egyptians are seated in darkness, and the Egyptians are, you can say, the Gentiles. They are sitting in darkness, while the Jews on the left, ולכל בני ישראל היה אור. To all the Israelites was light. The Israelites are sitting in light. They are dressed as Catalan Jews, and what they are doing, there is a rabbi here, and they are arguing about the text in the book. Yes, I mean, they are like, this is their life. This is, you can say, the main occupation of the elite Jews, that they study and know the Bible very well and the traditions and so on. So it's like you would say, them and we. I mean, the artist of the Sarajevo Haggadah is so cleverly is doing that in some of these miniatures, that it's really amazing to see how naive they look on the one hand. It's not really very sophisticated art, but on the other hand, very meaningful. The last section of my lecture, I want to show you a little bit about the story of the Haggadah, as much time as we have, where it was created. So we assume it was created in, as I said, around mid-14th century in Barcelona. At that time, the Jewish community of Barcelona was the largest and most important in Catalonia, or maybe in all of Spain at the time, with many synagogues. We know of at least 25 synagogues that were in Barcelona at that time. This is the Jewish quarter just behind the cathedral, the Juderia or Juderia of medieval Spain, of medieval Barcelona. And you can see today when you walk in the streets there, you can still see signs in Hebrew that were taken from tombstones or other stones that were in Jewish homes and reused, and are still today in the walls of in the old houses in the quarter, in this quarter. So the first page with the text, after all the illuminations of the Haggadah, is this one of Halachma, that shows a medieval castle. Let me show you a detail. Okay, I'm sorry. It's already too detailed. It's a medieval castle that we see here. Okay, and with each, within the center here is written Ha, and then Lachmania continues here. And so let's see the detail now. So it's like a castle, you can see with the crenellations. At the top of the castle, there is a coat of arms. We see this shield. There's no name of the patron in the manuscript. There's no name of who commissioned it, okay, and or when it was done. There's no colophon. But here we have a sign of this shield that you see here. And this shield is very well known in the Middle Ages, and it actually appears in other Catalan Haggadot. So it's very clear. It's like here you see it twice in the Haggadah that is called the Sister Haggadah. It's in the British Library as well. The same shield with stripes that are gold and red, yes? This is what we have also here. This is, of course, just why to put a shield in a Haggadah of coat of arms. This, what does it have to do with Borei Pri Hagef and the blessing that we have here, or Halachmania that we have in the Sarajevo Haggadah? This was a way of the Spanish patrons or the Spanish Jews that were the elite that commissioned these manuscripts to say how, let's say, loyal they are to the government or to the king who let them flourish and employ them. And there are those who probably commission this type of Haggadot. Like I want to show you one example that we know very well, is taking you to the city of Toledo, where there is the synagogue that survived to this day for centuries as a church after the expulsion, and today is a museum, a transitory synagogue that was commissioned, was built by one person, one Jew like that, one core Jew, Don Shmuel Alevi Abulafia, his name is, who was the chief treasurer of the king, and when he built this synagogue. And on the wall of the Torah Ark, this is the wall where the Torah Ark was, in these three openings here, there is a dedication that we see here. I'm showing you the dedication, and let me show it to you here, copy it so that you can see it better. And it says his name, Shmuel, who built this synagogue, like he imitates King Solomon, it says, and so on. He was really very important person, treasurer of the king, and so on. But he puts above the dedication the emblems of the king. So here they are in the shield, okay? The king was Pedro the Cruel, and these are his emblems. He was the king of Leon and Castilla. So Leon is lion, Castilla is the castle, and that's what we have in the shield of the coat of arms of this person, of this core Jew. In the Haggadah is the same. So they put in the Haggadah the emblem of Catalonia that we see here. Okay, so that's the emblem of Catalonia that already was in use, very wide use in the Middle Ages by the time the Haggadah was created. So here is the emblem in the Haggadah, and here is how it is in medieval manuscripts from Barcelona. Okay, so that's how, and by the way, it's still in use until today. Yes, you can see it until today in use. Of course, the cross we don't have in the Haggadah. We have only this lower section. So that's how, and there's the football team of Barcelona, Barça, yes, that are still using also this emblem. But so this is how we know it's Catalan, and we assume it's from Barcelona because this was the capital. So I don't know if Tadeo should tell me how much time I have.
Yes, actually, I would like you to finish really soon because we have really few questions. Okay. I mean, actually a lot, so I would like also ask.
So I'll finish in 2-3 minutes. I'll just tell you what happened to the Haggadah, how it ended in Sarajevo. So it was created in the mid-14th century, and at one point it left Spain. We don't know whether it left Spain in 1391 when there were riots in Spain and were pogroms, and the Jewish community of Barcelona was almost totally disappeared, or it left more likely in 1492 with the Great Expulsion from Spain. What we know is that in 1510, according to a sale of deed that is at the end of the Haggadah was sold. It was sold in Italy. How do we know that? Because the deed of sale that we see it here, and they copied it in Hebrew for those of you who can read it, and then translation into English, it was sold in 1510 in Italy. How do we know it's Italy? Because the handwriting is Italian Jewish, I mean, yes, Italian Jewish scribe is writing this, that was sold in 1510. So I assume it's about 18 years after the expulsion that was sold. and the name of the person who bought it was removed, and this happens in manuscripts because when it changed hands. I'll skip this. It was sold and probably given as a wedding gift in Italy. And why? How do we know that? Because in the middle of the illustrations of the Haggadah, we have in one of the pages this architectural background, and inside are this added decoration. This added decoration that you can see here. You can see it's not by the original artist, it's not colorful, and it's actually a bridegroom and a bride, and is going to put the ring on her finger. They are not Catalan Jews, but they are dressed as Italian Renaissance Jews, and this is a wedding scene. A wedding scene is you're going to put the ring on her finger, like we see in medieval Italy. So it was probably bought and given as a wedding gift in Renaissance Italy. Here is another miniature from an Italian Hebrew manuscript of the placing of the ring. And you can see the same type of the head that she's wearing, and the shorts like he is wearing it. So of course, this is typical North Italian Jewish dress that we see here. And this was done probably in Venice. Venice was one place where a Sephardic community was established after the expulsion in the ghetto of Venice, and probably the Haggadah made its way to there. We also think it was Venice because there is a censor. Okay, let me skip that. There is a censor remark at the end of the Haggadah that he reviewed it. Here is the censor edition in Italian. Let me show you a detail of it. Revisto per me, Giovanni Domenico Vistorini, 1609. So in 1609, this Giovanni Domenico Vistorini was a censor, a Christian censor of the Haggadah. He didn't find any problem with it and allowed it to be used by the Sephardim or Italian Jews that used it at that time in Venice. What happens next? Let me skip some slides and we'll end with that. So the Haggadah in Venice is probably traveling to another town, because Venice, the Jewish community of Venice, was in contact with other Sephardic communities along the sea, the Adriatic and other places, because there were merchants and traveling and had ships and so on. So we assume, that the Haggadah traveled to Dubrovnik, the sister community of the Venetian Sephardic community. This is Dubrovnik, and this is the synagogue of Dubrovnik of today. And from Dubrovnik, it traveled by land, via land, to Sarajevo. See, here's Dubrovnik. Sarajevo was a very important town at the time, an Ottoman center of merchants, and there was a big Sephardic community living there. And this is the community. I just show you how the Sarajevo Jews look like, even at the early 20th century. This is the Sephardim of Sarajevo, and one of them sold the Haggadah to the museum. It was in use in his family, as he testified. His name is Yosef Cohen. He testified that it was in his family since he remembers, and his father said they have it for generations. So it came to Sarajevo, probably sometime in the 17th or maybe 18th century, and was in the hands of the family until the late 19th century, when he was forced to sell it to raise some money, and he sold it to a museum, where it is until today. Okay, so I'll stop here, although we have a lot of, as you can say, materials to say still on the history of the manuscript, but anyway, you got the most of the important stuff, and I'm pleasantly answer any questions.
Thank you very much for this wonderful and fascinating lecture about this really also fascinating piece of art. Before I will read questions which people are asking, I would just like to remind everyone that I just sent you the link to our website, where in 2 days, the latest, we will upload the lecture, so you will be able to watch it, listen again. Okay, actually we have really many questions. I'm not sure if we will be able to answer all of them, but let's start with the with actually very basic but also interesting. Why the Haggadah is called Sarajevo if it originates in Catalonia?
Okay, so briefly to reply that, manuscripts were called in the late 19th century when really the art historians started to research illuminated manuscripts. They called it on the name of the city where they are housed. I mentioned like some famous one, the Paris Psalter, which is a Psalter that was illuminated in Constantinople, or the Genesis, the Vienna Genesis, is Genesis that was illuminated in Syria. So it's not the place of origin, but the place of the city where it is kept today. So the Sarajevo Haggadah is the only manuscript that we know by this name, but because it emerged at that time when this was the tendency of art historians.
Okay, thank you very much for this answer. Another one from Alexandra. What type of paper was used in the Haggadah book?
In this Haggadah, in this particular
yes,
parchment, is deer skin. According to Jewish law, only kosher animals can be used to make the parchment, and even the sinews, everything else has to be from kosher animals. And so it's all the Haggadot that we have from medieval Spain, or all the Hebrew manuscripts from Europe until the invention of printing are on parchment. That was the system at that time. You had to kill animals for that. Wasn't for vegetarians at the time. But anyway, the ships became very common at that time. So it was, let's say, they were more available than before. So it was common to do that and use the skin of the animals with very special technique. You can look in the internet and for some movies that will show you, for example, from the Getty Museum in Malibu, they have a whole film that shows you how it is, the process to clean the parchment, the skin, and prepare it for writing and so on.
Okay, thank you very much. Another question from Selma Zukic, which I understand she's from Sarajevo.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, was the entire Sarajevo Haggadah written and illustrated by one single artist?
We know that it was one, but maybe there were some corrections later, because some of the miniatures, you can see some very tiny additions or corrections, but originally it was by one artist, yes. We don't know if he was the scribe as well. It could be, but I'm not sure. I think it was different because the scribe added, let's say, information about the miniatures of what we see. Usually you don't need that, but he added that. So I think there was a collaboration probably between him and the artist.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. Another person from Sarajevo, Tamara. Yes, we have.
Sarajevo, I can tell all these Sarajevo people.
Lovely. Okay, so Tamara is asking, what was the main reason, in your opinion, for the Catalan Jews to adopt figural illustrations in their Haggadahs?
Okay, so it's not only Catalan Jews. I mean, in medieval Europe, Jews imitated the nobility of the time in commissioning those Jews who couldn't afford it, commissioning illuminated manuscripts, while Jews, let's say in Yemen or Iraq or Egypt, avoided human figures in their manuscripts. The Jews in Europe followed the Christian traditions and did that, although some rabbis were not so happy with that, especially Ashkenazi rabbis were not happy. And if the person who asked can look, for example, at the manuscript that's called the Bird's Haggadah, it's an Ashkenazi Haggadah, that all the figures have animal heads or birds' heads. So in Ashkenaz, they were more restrictive about that. In Sepharad, not at all, not only in Catalonia, but also in other parts, they did it wherever they could. So it means mostly in Haggadot or Mishneh Torah or books like that. In Portugal, for example, all the manuscripts that we have from Portugal, illuminated, from Lisbon, most of them, 15th century, are non-figurative as well. So it's not really one reply for every region, but Catalonia and other regions in Aragon, in Spain, in the Kingdom of Aragon, you have, or other even in the south, that will have human figures in them. So there it wasn't the problem. And in Italy, of course, it wasn't the problem. In Italy of the time, we have many manuscripts that we have, Hebrew manuscripts, that are all figurative and even have nudity in them. Even the Sarajevo Haggadah, Eve is shown totally nude.
Interesting. Okay, another question, and seems that also from another person from the area of Bosnia and Herzegovina.
That's lovely. That's nice.
Indira Jusic is asking, what was the story of a Haggadah in the Second World War? You mentioned you will talk about it later, but unfortunately, I had to stop you, but maybe briefly you can answer.
Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't have time we didn't get to it. So the Haggadah, as I said, became very well known in the cultural world of Europe since the late 19th century. So we have this general, this Nazi general that is in charge of Sarajevo in conquering that region, that comes to the museum and demands the Haggadah in gunpoint. Yes, he wants the director of the museum to give him the Haggadah because he knows it's very intelligent. Faulkner, his name is. We know exactly. I have his picture even in my presentation. I didn't have time to show you of this general that was in Bosnia before the war, so he knew about it, but also because he was very smart and intelligent, and he demands it. But what happens is that the director of the museum told him, "You came too late." And actually, there was another Nazi general just before you that took it. So he asks him, who was that? He says, I don't know. He didn't give me his name. What really happened is that the librarian of the museum, Dervish Korkut, a Muslim, hid the Haggadah just before. He knew. There are many stories about where he hid it because it's not very clear. Some say in the mountains, some say in a mosque, some say in the courtyard of this museum. There are many theories, but anyway, he was the one who was hiding it, and actually his family was involved in saving Jews from the Holocaust in Sarajevo. So we know it's thanks to him, and only after the war, it returned back to the museum.
Okay, very, very brave and very interesting. Okay, let me go to another question from Mr. Urlich. He's writing about the second page of the Haggadah. There's the image of God or of a person who keeps Shabbat. This is the question. And why in red?
Okay, so it's certainly not God, because the artist of the Sarajevo Haggadah is avoiding the image of God in any way possible. There is a beautiful dissertation about that, actually by a woman from Sarajevo that you can read. But the image of God is avoided in several ways in the Haggadah, so it cannot be God. It must be a Catalan Jew, and he is dressed as a Catalan Jew. He is dressed in red probably because of the position of holiness or Shabbat is definitely different from all the other figures. Is some kind maybe a person who made it to paradise or something like that. It's really now questionable. We don't know for sure, but he looks like a Catalan Jew, a man that is dressed in a very exotic, different garment that someone should check really and discover what it is. It's the topic. I would be happy if this person who asks these questions writes to me and we can really think about it together, or if he writes and investigates that, it will be really wonderful. The only way to do it is by comparing to other illuminations and also non-Jewish ones, and to try to see what this could mean. I don't think this has been solved yet, and it's a question for good research.
Indeed. So, Mr. Urlich, please write to us, to the email from which you received the invitation, and I will connect you both. Okay, actually, few people ask, will you reproduce your 2-volume facsimilia, History of Sarajevo Haggadah, again? Because somebody purchase it in 2020, but probably it's not longer available.
No, it is available, but only from the museum shop. If someone wants, you can write me or to the museum, and I'll give you the address of the woman there in the museum, that she's in charge of the gift shop, and you can buy it only from her, from the gift shop of the museum. But they ship it. I know of a person that received it last week. So within a few days you get it, but you have to pay differently. She'll explain to you how to pay, and you can still get it. It's available thus far in 2 languages, in Bosnian and in English, but there are editions planned in Spanish, in German, and in Hebrew. I don't know when and they will come. It depends on money, but in the meantime, we have 2 editions already.
Lovely. So this is very important information. If anyone would like to purchase a copy, please send us an email, and we will connect you with a person at the museum.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And last but not least, some people ask, could you say briefly, please, about menorahs, or actually Hanukkot behind you?
Okay, so I also collect. I started with collecting only books about Jewish art, but I now deal more with what I call ephemera and simple art. All the Hanukkot that I have, all the Hanukkah lamps that I have, are from Israel, from Palestine. I mean, they begin in around 1900 till almost the end of the century, the 20th century. And I like the aesthetics of them and the story of the state of Israel that they tell. But it's really another lecture to show how the Hanukkah lamp, that is again an object that is supposedly very similar to each one to another, tell you the story of the history of the Jewish people in the 20th century in this case. And of course, it goes back to, you can tell about the Hanukkah lamps from medieval Spain we have from Italy, from many countries, Germany, from Iraq, from Morocco. Each country has its own story for the Hanukkah lamps.
Indeed. Okay, thank you very much, Professor Shalom Sabar. Except of many questions which I couldn't quote all of them, we have also a lot of really great comments. So thank you for this wonderful lecture, and I believe we'll host you again. Maybe I can think about lecture around Hanukkah, so you will be able to tell more about your collection and the holiday itself. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you everyone who joined, and Chag Sameach to everyone who celebrates Passover.
Chag Sameach, yeah, happy Pesach, and happy Easter for those who are celebrating Easter as well.
Holiday of freedom, that's the most important.
And Ramadan Kareem, because I also
Ramadan Kareem for the Muslims.
Noticed we had a guest from Morocco. All the best.
Ramadan Kareem, yes, definitely.
Thank you.
Bye.